The BBC is dying, and I'm here to piss on its grave. For years now, the BBC has been losing licence fee payers, especially recently, as 1 million households have stopped paying the tax, as it increased to almost £200 a year. For anyone not from the UK, the BBC has been very comparable to Hollywood. They've always been a cesspool of ideological lunatics, but they used to be lunatics that could make genuinely good television. People would begrudge paying the licence fee, but they'd still pay it, as they actually use the service. There is actually no compulsion to pay the licence fee if you don't watch the BBC or live television, and quite frankly, with the quality they've been putting out, why would you? That's why the number is expected to fall by 1 million people, just down to 21 million people overall. That's on top of the 300,000 that stopped paying it last year, as there's just tons of other competition, which quite frankly make better content and don't lie to you all the time because they hate you. To live under the BBC is to know that you have a governmental propaganda wing that despises you as a very people, and they want you to know it. They've lied about everything from TV detector vans. Don't worry, we'll get back to those later. Oh, look at that thing. Are you afraid? I especially like their press release about the new generation of detector vans, equipped with advanced technology, like the ability to remove branding. Yes, when it comes to the BBC, I fully believe that the people there are evil. It's just that they're so incompetent, they don't really achieve anything. They're the perfect example of if they had a brain, they'd be dangerous. They also have departments like BBC Verify. To find this, I did originally search what did the BBC set up as the Ministry of Truth, only for the AI to tell me it's not actually established a Ministry of Truth, which I guess is correct because from the BBC's own description, BBC Verify are experts in disinformation, and they'll tell you what the truth is. One of the things I do agree with the BBC Verify on, though, is that the BBC is very transparent. I mean, you can see the BBC's transparent messaging in what they're trying to indoctrinate kids with, such as this, Boudica and the Roman invasion cartoon.
Welcome to Britannia.
Yes, welcome indeed. My favourite part of this is they've got the weather accurate. It's cloudy and raining, and yet for some reason these ancient English needed protection from the sun. That doesn't exist in England. That's not the only one, this is in all their cartoons about Rome.
They build new forts and Roman roads that link the areas they've conquered.
So far so good. A lot of our modern roads are just made on top of the Roman ones that were built back then. Oh no, something's changed though, that's weird. The only thing I seem to have learnt from BBC Teach is that the Romans weren't actually Italian. Remember, the BBC are experts in disinformation. With such an open derision and hatred of the indigenous English people then, you can understand why BBC executives have said they face an increasing problem of householders just refusing to open the door. They look out their window, see someone from the BBC, and tell them to go fuck like they deserve. What can I say? All's fair was correct.
Justice prevailed, as it always does.
The English people are always polite and civilised. Although if you get on the wrong side of them, they will tell you exactly what they think. This is why the number of visits to unlicensed homes increased by 50% last year. Didn't actually translate to any higher sales or successful prosecutions. People are just turning off. Now, you could have thought this would have led the BBC to realise that they were scum. Fire everybody there, actually start hiring normal people. They could change themselves from the inside out to represent and lobby for the opinion of English people, to help improve the nation rather than aiming for its collapse. And yet instead, you can see their disdain and derision just in the article headline itself from The Guardian. The BBC is losing $1 billion a year in potential licensee revenue. This isn't even as it sounds, especially if you're not from the UK. This is calculated from the cost of households either evading the fee or saying they do not need a TV license. You are perfectly allowed to not have a TV license. There are many cases where you do not need one if you don't watch the BBC or live television. And yet the BBC is asking as if you owe them that money anyway, like they are entitled to every person in the country paying it, because that's what they were previously used to. This is like Coca-Cola going, I can't believe you haven't bought me today. No one is required to. They don't owe you the money. That isn't lost revenue. And yet that is the way that the BBC classifies it. And that's just from the no license needed declarations. You don't even have to declare it. I refer you back to the go f yourselves option. The license fee has become harder to justify as people consume digital platforms such as YouTube and TikTok. The BBC is an organisation under severe pressure that without a modernised approach focused on more online viewing, the broadcaster will see faith in the licensee system ebb away. Quite frankly, lots of younger people have never watched the BBC. They're not interested in it. It produces crap. And so they've never paid a license fee because everything they watch is either pre-recorded or not the BBC itself. Of course, if you don't declare that you don't need a TV license, they will send you letters. This is actually a website where he has been recording his letters he got from the BBC since 2008. All of these letters are just the ones that he's gotten this year. And these are things like, we have passed your details on to the enforcement team. You have a 10-day window. We're giving you 10 days to get correctly licensed. He doesn't need one. He's already correct. You cesspool of filth. We did not hear from you. This address is still unlicensed. This is no different than Marmite going, you haven't bought me this week. We are giving you 10 days to buy me. Will you be in on the 4th of June, or should you just tell us to please read carefully official notice? A reminder of the law. Visit undertaken by our enforcement team. Everything about these letters is carefully created to scare people that don't know their rights. The BBC doesn't just lie to people, create false histories, and hate the English public, but they manipulate, exploit them, and try to scare people who know no better into giving them money. I think my favourite fake fact from them is the TV license fee evasion rate, which is, they have no idea what it is. This is just them guessing, and presumably increasing the number over time so they can lobby and go, we need it from general taxation, as we have the 4th highest fee in Europe. Of course, the interesting thing is in the UK, YouTube is the 2nd highest destination, and it's free. The BBC could replicate such a system. It's just they know if they tried, they would fail, which is why they have to lie, deceive, and manipulate people in the first place. You see this from places like the US, where YouTube is still 2nd, only behind Netflix, and that is for minutes watched on television. This doesn't even include mobile or desktop usage. I don't really care how they try and gaslight me that actually the price has gone down when we were forced to by the government who kept freezing the fee. Especially at the same time that you're like, well, actually, we should probably get rid of the fee. It could be changed. We could just add a tax on broadband connections by making everyone pay for it, even if they don't use the propaganda station that systemically discriminates against them. Oh, we could just steal it from people in general, from a general tax. Part funding through advertising. Part. Or a subscription model. I'd go for the last one, as that would definitely kill you as an industry. So far, the only good news we've had is that the Culture Secretary rules out funding from taxes. Not that I would trust anything said there, as far as I could yeet them uphill. Because the real problem at the BBC is the people at the BBC. It didn't always used to be that way. Yes, they've always been lunatics. Again, like Hollywood. But like Hollywood, they used to make good stuff. In fact, if I had to reel off my favourite shows, a significant, if not majority of them, would come from the BBC. These include Coupling, Fawlty Towers, Red Dwarf, Dad's Army, Robin Hood, Merlin, Crime Traveller, which was one of the few things ever to make a time travel show and actually have it accurate, by which I mean the only form of time travel that makes sense without having to jump through logical loopholes or deal with paradoxes. And my favourite spy show of all time, Spooks. It was great throughout all of its series, and then it was ruined by Jon Snow, who for some reason joined the movie. The movie being crap wasn't all his fault, but he definitely contributed. And back in the day, the license fee did make sense. I know it's strange to any Americans, why do you have to have a license for a TV? It's not actually what it is. You can own a television and not pay the license fee. It's like we have a road tax, it's not actually if you go on the roads. It goes back to 1946 when the BBC was the only broadcaster. So it made sense to call it a TV license fee when it was the only thing on television. And if you owned a television, you would be watching the BBC. It was the only thing there. As we're a nation of tradition, even though the license fee, what it's needed for, and any exceptions may have changed over time, we still stick with the term. But that tradition is at itself a core problem of the BBC. They don't respect it, or the people that made it. And so if you hate the people, why would they continue to give you money? You made all of these great shows they were happy to pay for, but then you also destroyed them, you got rid of them, you changed them into something that they weren't. One of the best examples of this is Top Gear, and how woke BBC wanted to sack one Top Gear host because the lineup was too white, despite getting record viewers, the show boss reveals. Even in articles from 2010, Top Gear was renowned to have been seen by 350 million viewers across 170 countries. This is one of the most successful television shows of all time, and Jeremy Clarkson was the guy that made it that way. Yes, other people were involved, but if Grand Tour and Clarkson's Farm has taught you anything, that guy knows what people want to watch on television. He can pick people that will work together on a show and make it gold. And the BBC hated him for it, because he was English, in England. Even though the public were clear about their feelings for Richard, James and Jeremy, sometimes the BBC senior management appeared not to have got the memo. It's because they don't care. The BBC doesn't care what the opinion of the English people is. They see it as their job to mould it, to curve it, to change what it is by any means necessary. No matter how much lies and propaganda it takes, the BBC sees it as their job, their duty to do, and they want the English people to pay for it. He was summoned to one meeting when bosses told him they had tremendous news. Top Gear was pulling in Black and Asian viewers. So, it's an English show for English people. Anyone else that it happened to bring in was entirely coincidental. It wasn't and shouldn't be made for them. They are entitled and more than welcome to like the show, but they're also, when it comes to the taste and style of the show, shouldn't really be considered. The executive added, "So how about replacing one of your lineup with a young Black or Asian presenter?" So hang on, you've got these people who have chosen, seemingly quite happily, to watch three white, middle-class, middle-aged men doing what they do, and in response to that, we should now break that team up, the one they enjoy watching, and give them something they've most likely not even asking for? Isn't that patronizing? I knew this was checkmate. I'd managed to get patronizing and ethnic diversity into the same sentence. But this is in itself the problem. Inside the BBC, they are so indoctrinated, you are fighting them from within their frame. The correct answer is really, who cares? They're happy to watch the show, why should we change it? Is a good enough point on its own. Or it would be, if the BBC weren't full of insane ideological lunatics who shouldn't be in a job. Certainly not in charge of the BBC, as they didn't even understand what the show was. Some people will think that Top Gear is a car show, but again, even CBS News in 2010 were going, it's not actually about cars. It's just about the adventures of three clever middle-aged blokes who travel the world doing competitions, races, and challenges. It's part reality TV show, part buddy movie, and part Monty Python. Clarkson morphed the show from a boring automotive program in the 70s into a global driving adventure. The problem came in 2012. Well, the problem was there before. It's just the BBC had no power over it until 2012, when Clarkson sold the rights to the BBC for the show. He agreed a new deal and a new 3-year contract with the BBC that would run out in 2015, after BBC Worldwide bought full rights to the show. Cause in 2014, BBC came out and went, "We don't want any new all-male panel shows." Do you want to know the year that comedy died in the UK? Previously, I used to watch panel shows all the time. They were hilarious. It was some of our best programming. Now they're not funny and I don't watch them at all, which is very strange because they're the same presenters. It's the same people on the shows. It's not that these people can't be funny. It's that for some reason at the BBC, these people can't be funny. That is, the original pre-2014 ones anyway. Back before this, they would have like a token woman on a show, and because of this, it drove competition, and the women that were on those panels pre-2014 were genuinely funny. Sarah Millican being one of my favourites back in the day, but also joined by everyone from Joe Brand, Catherine Tate, Kathy Burke, and Diane Morgan. Of course, after 2014, it ceased to be about who actually had talent, and now, if you just didn't have dangly bits, we need to crowbar you on the show. And they weren't funny. How were they supposed to be funny when you now had too many open spots for too few female comedians that were any good? This also led to the change of various other shows. Suddenly QI, which was an all-male panel, couldn't be hosted by Stephen Fry. Sandy Toxvid had to take over because what was between her legs was good enough. And this isn't even a comment about her. She is also a funny comedian. But just because crowbarring an identity group into a role may work occasionally, it's doomed to fail for nearly everything. And it was entirely done by statistics. For QI, over 32 episodes, there's only been 4 where there was more than one woman who was a contributor. People did like the show though, didn't they? Look, one episode in the coming series is scheduled to have 3 on it. These people aren't funny. Mock the Week has 7 contributors each week, but has not had more than one woman in an episode since the statement. You mean they're concerned about making good television instead of being sexist? How abominable. Have I Got News for You has 3 full seasons since the commitment, 29 episodes, and only 2 have had more than one woman as a contributor. The BBC became a cesspool of sexist, racist discrimination, and it destroyed all of their previous good shows. They started hiring incompetent, evil people to fill the roles rather than talented people who knew what the English public wanted. Instead, it filled the company full of rabid people who all, because they got hired by this ideology, determined that they had to keep pushing it. They were true believers now. The fate of their careers depended on turning the BBC solely into an ideological wrecking ball. They would get fired if ever the company needed to care about quality or giving the public what they wanted. And so instead, they saw it as their duty to change the public. That means after the BBC bought the rights to Top Gear and had a 3-year contract for the hosts in 2012, 3 years later, in 2015, they fired Jeremy Clarkson. Oh, sure, he punched a guy. But they had been building a case coming for him in the show for a long time at this point. That was an excuse they thought they could use, and they used it. And it killed the show. Because quite frankly, Jeremy Clarkson was the show. He was the talent, and he had dangly bits. And that was a problem for the BBC. The idea that there might be some kind of innate differences between men and women, well, the BBC can't handle that. Maybe some people are just better at some things than others. Maybe everyone isn't equal, and there's actually a hierarchy where some people are better than others at things. The BBC can't handle that. To them, Jeremy Clarkson was just the same as anyone else. He was an interchangeable cog in the machine, and he could be replaced with anyone else. And they tried. Did you know that The Office was originally a BBC creation with Ricky Gervais, the guy that really doesn't mind defending people?
We were going to do an in memoriam this year, but when I saw the list of people that had died, it wasn't diverse enough. I thought, nah, not on my watch.
The BBC cares about defending people. Do you think Ricky Gervais, if he was starting again, would ever be allowed to make anything for the BBC? Do you think Ricky Gervais would be allowed to make The Office for the BBC now? One of the reasons that shows are so crap now is because the very people, the talented people that made the shows you care about could not make it in today's arena. The people in charge of the institutions would never allow them to be successful, never allow them to grow to such a place where they could have a platform to be the people they are. They would either have to change and become new ideological lunatics, or hide their light under a bushel and pretend to be as evil as everyone around them. And those are just the talented people. And of course you have the other group of people, the ones who don't really have opinions, they have everybody else's opinions. And so as the dominant ideology grows more in power, they just swing along with it and turn into more extreme, rabid enforcers of the dominant social order. We saw that with Doctor Who, a show that was revived by Russell T Davies. Its return, modernization's what brought me into Doctor Who. And yes, he may have had significant help from others. I'm looking at you, Stephen Moffat, who is, quite frankly, just vastly more intelligent than Russell T Davies. But the revival was well liked and revived the series, only for it to decline over time due to increasing ideology and, oh look, it's a man who's Doctor Who.
Yes, we know.
We know everything. Thanks.
And you know nothing?
Yeah, the BBC can't allow a man to host a show anymore.
We've got all that power, but there is a way to get rid of it. Something a male-presenting Time Lord will never understand.
So Russell T Davies was brought back with David Tennant, the most liked of the modern Doctors. Or was. And then he killed the show because he proved that he isn't the same man he used to be either. Or maybe he is the same man and other people had him in a straitjacket. A straitjacket he'd now escaped. There's actually an upcoming spin-off show for Doctor Who in the modern times. The War Between Land and Sea, which is now for some reason made one of the female Sea Devils remarkably human-looking. Which, considering they used to look like this, I can only assume they humanized her so another woman can shag her. Russell T Davies isn't smart or subtle, hence his talking about the bi generation in the last series. This guy is generally obvious the kind of reasons why they're doing things. Although, I have to say, they may have put their foot in it with the War Between Land and Sea, where the humans are clearly the good guys defending their territory against an invasive species that is trying to kill them. Yes, it turns out that this series is about a war where the humans are getting invaded by oh, that's awkward. So the BBC's response to this is they're losing money, they've lost all their shows, they can't make anything good anymore, and people are fleeing the license fee in droves. And those are the indigenous English people. If you think that people from far off lands are going to be travelling to the country and be like, oh, love these new Romans, you are in for a surprise. Have the BBC tried to change? Have they tried to adapt? Have they learnt? No, they just want to force you by changing the taxes and gaslighting. This is from YouGov that might as well be changed to You Lie, but, you know, some would argue it's the same thing anyway. Is the BBC biased? What the public thinks following the Davy and Turnus resignations. Do you believe BBC News is or is not biased? Yes, it is generally biased in favour of left-wing political views, 31%. 19 thought it was biased the other way. This is why we need to bring back asylums. And 19 think it's neutral. Of course, some people decided to report it as combining all three of these options and going, the majority think they're not. But as half of the country is below average intelligence, I'm going to assume both the people that wrote those articles and believed them are in that lower half. Or they're smart and lying. That is the other option. They could just be evil. The devastating memo that plunged the BBC into crisis. Document exposes a string of incidents that suggest serious bias in the corporation's reporting. This included things like the doctored speech from over in the US, bias reporting about the Far East, raises concerns about a unit of rogue alphabets who were censoring coverage of news reports, and highlights how the BBC's own flagship fact-checking service Verify, remember them, experts in disinformation, produced thoroughly wrong reports suggesting car insurers were racist. And I say again, so it's a car insurer's job to work out your individual risk according to the categories that you fulfill. So if your job is a salesman and you drive around more, your insurance will be higher than somebody who barely uses their car except to go to the shops. Men also have far more serious accidents than women, even though women have more. They just have little bumps. They're far more risk-averse than men are, who drive faster and have more lethal crashes. That's why male insurance is more than female insurance. And if different groups have different danger risks, they're gonna have different insurance. And that's a good thing. As for, the debate that the Rogue Unit was doing, I actually think a better example is from Martin Croxall, who the BBC actually said broke rules over, having a facial expression. Not allowed to make a facial expression when you read the news. Not on the BBC, you bigot. It's actually quite an amazing news report.
Says that the aged, pregnant people, women, and those with...
Oh, I know. You probably think there's more to that clip. There isn't. That's the entire context. She corrected their false, stupid, inaccurate language to the correct term, full of the actual English meaning that matters so that the audience can understand what she's saying. And the expression, well...
pregnant people, women...
It's that. She opened her eyes a bit. However low someone's opinion of the BBC is, it should be worse. Didn't used to always be like this, back in the days where they had standards. They would even enforce an accent to their standards were that high. Well, that's gone out the window. Anything goes now, except logic, facts, science. Now the BBC is only supported by filth, such as The Conversation. You may remember The Conversation from articles such as, was Tolkien really racist? To which I ask, so, is there anything that could be written in this article by, Demetra Femi, who also wrote the article defending Rings of Power, for the same reason, obviously. But is there anything you could find out about him that would harm the quality of his work? Because they slander the man, they slander the person. Because to them it's the prestige, the ego, the status of a person. It's their academic certificate. They try to undermine what they think matters, which to them is not agreeing with the dominant social order. And if you don't, then anything you create, say, or do must immediately be rejected. Whereas to me, you could tell me anything about him. Say he did anything, his books would still be as good. What I care about is the truth and the quality of a thing. The person saying the thing is entirely irrelevant. And they know this, that's why they want to change the adaptation, why they want to do prequels, why they want to alter the actual content. And yet when they give their reasons for it, they always talk about the author. They slur the irrelevant to use it as an excuse to change the material. Because if they came out and said, we want to alter this because we're evil, egotistical scum, you just wouldn't let them. They had a problem that Tolkien's Middle-earth is hierarchical. Like reality. Or that even spirit and matter had a hierarchy. That some things are innately evil, like the BBC. Or that orcs the fruit of the poison vine that is human fear of the other. They legitimately would support the orcs have arrived at the city. Well, don't be let them in. I don't know if you've met the orcs, but they tend to get stabby. And she also argued that, well, some believe that Tolkien was writing a mythology for England. Why would audiences these days think of England as white anyway? It's turned into a vibrant melting pot. Why would a contemporary adaptation not reflect that? Why would we not destroy his work? Have you not understood we're the ones in charge now? It's time not to portray England how it was, but how it would be better. I think that was a comment from a Doctor Who writer, wasn't it? It really complains about purist fans. Adaptation's a project of their time, and a re-envisioning of the original material. We should be allowed to burn history to the ground. Don't you understand? We're taking on something that isn't ours and destroying it to pervert it to us. The BBC really would be proud of you. It's not that the BBC is a unique institution in this way. It's just one completely unbridled, or at least they thought it was, of having to care as something such as base, as uncivilized as an audience, a paying audience. They thought they have everyone locked down by law that you had to give them money. And they could propagandize you all they wanted. They didn't have to care what the English people thought of them because they were made to give them money. And that's why they want to change it to general taxation, so they can keep doing it. And that's why they can't be allowed to. The obvious truth about the BBC is that, of course, they're biased. Anyone that would say otherwise is lying, or so thick that you shouldn't be talking to them anyway. They really can pick their own poison on that one. For quite a few members of the House of Commons committee, the answer to claims of left-wing bias at the BBC could be annulled simply by firing the only right-wing person there. In fact, MPs have spent a hefty amount of time insisting that the BBC is actually biased to the right. All the while, BBC execs claim they're not systematically or institutionally biased. However, these people are mistaken or lying. feathering their beds with a certain fluffy sophistry or disingenuous semantics. All those executives know full well that the BBC draws its staff from within the ever-widening pool of liberal left middle-class humanities graduates. These people do not hang up their political opinions when they enter the BBC, because they do not think they're opinions at all. Instead, they think they're just being nice. They see their opinions as accepted fact. They're marching forwards ever closer to the utopia, and therefore if you disagree with them, you personally are standing in the way of utopia, which makes you evil in any action used to remove you from their path. Good. Because they are being nice, kind, compassionate, the people who disagree with them are thus nasty and mean. This extends not just throughout news and current affairs, but into drama, comedy, reviews, light entertainment, and even, bizarrely, sport. Interestingly, the especially averse to this message are the people who actually watch the BBC and pay the license fee. The elderly and conservative-minded. The young don't watch the Beeb. They know this problem exists, but to admit that would be to signal the death knell for the BBC. So they've decided to do what they always do, circle the wagons. Because parliamentary reporting is so heavily patrolled, it's close to pristine, and forgetting that every morning producers turn up to the Today programme with ideas for the editorial meeting which devolve directly from their own prejudices, the stuff that has occurred to them. When people ask why Hollywood or the BBC make crap, they're not intending to. When you say to them they have to write better scripts, they think they are. These people are so one-dimensional, so unable to abstract another point of view, to attempt to even simulate or model one would be repulsive to them. It would be the same as asking someone to think like a serial killer in their mind. Like, no, that's repulsive and wrong. They couldn't even begin to think about those ideas. And there may even be a slight fear that they'd find out they were true, and then they'd get rejected by all of their friends. But without being able to model somebody else's point of view, and being unwilling to hire them because they don't want to work, essentially, with somebody they see as evil, it means there's a permanent blind spot there, and they are never able to change path. Because the correct path might be towards what they hate. Addressing this is the only recourse left to the BBC, in reality, to attract a politically diverse workforce. That's not exactly true. It's not the diversity that matters, it's the fact that you hire the correct people. It means hiring people who aren't at the BBC. You can have a totally ideologically homogenous group of people, as long as they're correct. Nobody has a problem with hiring a load of people that think 2 + 2 = 4. The problem only happens when you hire a load of deluded lunatics that don't know what reality is, and in fact would like to ban anybody which talks about reality. In the meantime, the staff of the corporation cleave to their worldview, an outrage that the right-wingers are trying to subvert their beloved organisation. They're probably commissioning Rupert to do a documentary about it right now, and would do so without grasping the irony, without grasping the point. The BBC remains in La La Land. They like it there. This will continue to be a problem for the BBC. There's always been comments about it. Even when the majority of the nation supported one side, the BBC, they were determined to pretend they didn't. And the reason why The Guardian, even 6 years ago, was asking, why can't we agree on what's true anymore? What they meant was, why won't you agree with us about what's true anymore? Why have we lost the power to tell you what's true? Technology encourages us to believe that we have first-hand access to the real facts. And now we can't stop fighting about it. But the thing is, you do. The reason why people stopped listening to The Guardian is because they realised it was lying to them. Because they did have access to the real facts and no longer needed to have all their information filtered through the BBC or The Guardian. When people found out the truth, they realised they'd been lied to all along. And there seems to be a business model for that. You can see it happening on Twitch, where a person can be live for 10 hours, get watched by someone for 10 hours, and essentially, that person is their news station. Everything gets filtered through them. That's no different than what the news used to be, and you can just go on the BBC's news website to find out. See various reports of man stamped somebody. It's all the details you'd need, just a man. The problem is that this became so obvious that just the lack of reporting became reporting. People realized that when they left out information, it was as good as saying the information. Just like watching a black hole. You can't see it because it doesn't expel light, but you can still see the black hole is there just by the outline of the void that remains in the sky. People learned to read between the lines, and the press got angry about it. And the thing is, they're perfectly entitled to. If you want to set up a company and lie to everybody and people still voluntarily give you their money for some reason, I don't know, maybe it's entertainment value of what comedy will they lie to me about next? At least you're a business where your customers are supporting you. The BBC doesn't need any of that, though. They tax people against their consent and then send threatening letters when you have the gall of telling you where they can shove it. And in return for this theft, they force-feed you stuff like Doctor Who or the war between land and sea. They tell you that you're actually scum, you're wrong, that you've been polluting the ocean, that it's your fault.
Making tea thinking it's someone else's problem. But it's not. This is my fault. We all played our part. Now we have to help fix it.
It really shows you the low class of people at the BBC, that they admit they can be outsmarted by children.
And the thing is, our kids know this. They're way ahead of us. Why aren't we listening?
And look, I fully believe that this is true of Russell T Davies, but there's a lot of us which have a fully functioning brain, and yet I'm supposed to get lectured to by my lessers. I'm not even sure that there's a problem with preaching and entertainment, because there was always good messaging put into things. I think a lot of the problem comes from when you feel like you're getting preached to by people you wouldn't piss on if they're on fire, and yet they never stop to consider to look back on the past, which they've always seemed to hate, and look at the good shows that they can't make anymore. And just like Hollywood, they'll never be able to ask the question of, was it me? Am I the problem? Because they're too busy, just like everyone in the entertainment industry, trying to get theirs, with their hands in the till, all pretending to be good people, to pretending to do this for the benefit of everybody, except always coincidentally demanding that they get more. With the BBC, it's always self-interest. And while some in the UK may think of it as an institution that goes back decades and should be protected, I see it as an institution which is rotted from the inside. And the sooner it dies, the better. But those are just my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know down in the comments below. Like the video if you like the video. Subscribe, more videos like this in the future. And I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.